This story was submitted by Blahbasket31684. Tilting It. The ghost in the PA system. Now, normally, I'm not one to be superstitious, especially considering I haven't seen much paranormal action. But rewind about a year ago, and may this story begin. It was a dark and stormy work night. Ironic, isn't it? And I was busy stocking the shelves at my job. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The storm was quiet, thanks to the storm. From what I've been told, one of my coworkers would often hear what sounded like voices or see a light flicker. I always blamed the store being old and having bad wiring. Well, not tonight. I'd just finished stocking a bunch of chocolate bars when a call rang over the intercom. Customer needs assistance in pain relief. So I made my way over to the aisle. Only there was nobody there. But the call station was on and flashing, meaning someone pressed it. I had a good look around. Not a stir from anywhere in the building. Only the light noise of music playing over the PA system. I returned to my duties. After roughly 20 minutes, the call came on again. Customer needs assistance in pain relief. I shuffled over to the aisle. Again, the call button was lit up and flashing. Again, I silenced the call and returned to my duties. No customers entered the building for many hours. Eventually, we went to close for the night. Lights off, doors locked, no customers. Another call from aisle 15. Customer needs assistance in pain relief. We did a full security sweep of the building. Again, no customers. We gathered at the door to lock up for the night and go home. I let my boss know we'd had several calls to the pain relief aisle throughout the night, but no one was there. My boss looked at me, puzzled. She said, "That call station hasn't worked for like 2 months now." She was right. Ooh, that was a good one. I feel like a lot of ghost stories are about graveyards or like some spooky house. It's a little more believable when it happens at someone's job. Because there's a lot of people. Your boss, your coworkers, the customers, the security system. I feel like that's a lot harder to like make up. Alright, this is Whiskers' scary story. It happened back in 2020. And it was my own experience with who I believed was the Hat Man. It started with me walking into what I think was my room, and I approached a figure. Now, this figure was entirely shadow and had a large hat on his head. But somehow, I knew that he had his back turned to me. And I remember asking him, "Is my house haunted?" He simply replied, "Yes." I then got images of 3 people in my mind. A young girl, about 8 years old, and I think she had a large floppy hat. A teen girl with blonde hair that looked like she could have been 16 or 18, and an older, Caucasian man of about 60 or so years old with a panicked expression. Not long after that, I was laying on the grass in my backyard, but that teenage blonde girl was laying beside me. We both sat up and she turned to look at me. But she had no mouth. She just had a hole for a mouth. And she looked at me with no words. Things kind of blended together and spiraled into another. I woke up shortly after. I've always been sensitive to the energies of spirits. I often feel like I'm being watched, and it's been stated that the property I live on is a bit weird. I don't overly believe it's the house itself that may have spirits, as my grandparents built it when my dad was in his teen years, but rather the land I live on. Someone I live with had a dream once as well. She saw a group of witches walking out of the woods during the night and walking towards the house. That's about as much as I know. What I like about this story is that it's one thing when you experience something for yourself, it's another when a friend has that same thing, especially in a dream. That's kind of weird. This next story is from an anonymous viewer, so who knows who it's from. When I was a young boy, no older than 3rd or 4th grade, probably younger, I lived in a small house in Arizona. My bedroom was all the way at the end of the hall, and the door opened pretty much into the hall, if not slightly off center. I was pretty afraid of the dark, to the point where I slept with a nightlight and with the door open. One night, I remember being on edge. I've always had a terrible time falling asleep, something that bugs me to this day. Well, on this night, I wished for nothing more than to fall asleep. To this day, it's one of the few things I remember vividly. I was in my bed, sheepishly looking over my blankets. I heard it, and I felt it, before I saw it. An oppressive darkness, like a tangible inky black mist, preceded it. The aura of dread and overwhelming fear choked the words out of my throat and petrified my body, which felt increasingly insignificant and small. But I couldn't look away from the open doorway into that foreboding hallway of writhing shadows and darkness. I heard its footsteps, or rather, its movement. It was a shuffling pattern that didn't make sense. Then, it was a heavy thump, but muffled, like a foot falling on fabric or slippers, then shuffling. I saw it. Its silhouette forever burned into my mind. It stood there in the middle of the hall for what felt like hours. My heart stopped as it began moving, and I finally made sense of it. It was covered in a robe, tattered and dark in color. And when I looked where I guessed the face was, there was only hints of discolored white and gray patches, illuminated by the faintest of light. Or maybe my eyes were adjusted properly. It walked and walked and walked until it stood right in front of my doorway. A singular hand crept to the frame of the door, resting on it, and I realized it was just bone, but not quite human. Then its head dipped down, as though it was making a movement to enter my doorway, and I saw its face, or rather, what was left. It was the skull of some kind of animal, like a deer or a goat. It remained there, staring at me, hands on the doorframe for an eternity. Then, it let go of the door, crept back into the hall, facing me the entire time. We shared one last look, one that drained me of all my wits and energy, then turned around and left. That was my first time having sleep paralysis and the hallucinations associated with it. That almost sounds like a skinwalker. Here's the next story. I believe this was my first ever actual ghost experience. I was about 6 at the time. I had no school, so I was in the living room of the apartment me and my mother lived in. We were playing on her Xbox. I would look over to my right, and for a few seconds, I would see a kid. The kid was wearing a hockey shirt and had a beanie on. He was entirely see-through. He seemed to appear from behind the couch that I was on and reached out for something I couldn't really see at the time before vanishing. Now, for some reason, I didn't react at all to seeing a literal ghost just appear beside me and then vanish with no explanation. But years later, I remembered that moment and thought about it. And then I remembered that I had actually seen that kid before in real life, once or twice at school. I can remember him laughing at a joke one of us made. I never learned his name or anything, though. What concerns me and makes me question things is why I never recall seeing him other than that one time, and why would I mention that experience to my mother a few years ago? She was unaware it ever happened, and she asked me why I never told her. Fair question, I suppose. But also, that if I had mentioned it, we would have left the area, which she never explained why. So creepy. I think there's something special about the horror of seeing children ghosts. I don't know what it is. Like, in theory, children ghosts should not be that scary because they're kids. But there's just something extra creepy about little kid ghosts. That last story, by the way, was from Whiskers. And this one is also from Whiskers. These are a number of smaller experiences that have happened over the years. Finding a 3-pronged faint scratch mark on the back of my neck. I often see shapes and figures in the corner of my vision, but they're never there when I turn to look at them. Hearing my name every so often, but it really sounds like someone else said it. I once had a dream of a house that was on fire, burned from the inside out. And a few days later, a house that someone I knew lived in burnt down in the same way I saw in my dream. Thankfully, they weren't hurt in it. A straw star decoration that we had on a nearby table suddenly flipped off in the direction of someone I lived with. But there wasn't a breeze or anything else to compel it. Sometimes during the winter, or even non-winter months, I swear I can hear crunching footsteps near my room coming from outside. They've lessened a lot since I was younger, but they were almost nightly when I was little. That's all for now. I can relate to some of that, actually. So this is Horse's ghost story. I was setting up our antique battery charger from the 1960s around 5 p.m. and I had no idea it was going to storm. I check on it from time to time. One of the last times I checked on it, I flipped on the light, and there's an outline of a person that looks up at it with his hand on the battery charger and disappears from the feet up. I turn the lights back off and go do something else for a little while. I haven't seen it since. Spooky garage ghost, it's like phasmophobia. This is Nora Bellerose's ghost story. My first experience with the paranormal began when I was 6 years old. My family and I lived in a rural farming area, and at the time, there wasn't much to do, since this was the era before smartphones and social media. So I played around a lot outside. And so my father bought me one of those big green plastic slides to use in front of the house, where they could keep an eye on me from the kitchen window as I played the day away. But shortly after the slide was installed, that's when it started to happen. My nightly ritual as a kid was to go upstairs where all our bedrooms were and just sit in the big corner chair in my parents' room at night while they slept and just quietly listen to music on my CD player until I get tired and go to sleep. The chair I sat in also had a window on my left, facing the front of the house, and right below me, I saw the green slide. But that wasn't the only thing I saw. Right next to the left side of the slide, I saw a man covered in complete darkness. He wore a top hat and a trench coat, with both hands in his pockets. And all he did was stand still, and he stared at my slide, never moving. He only appeared at night, so during the day, I could freely play on my slide. But when night came, he would be in that exact same spot. Never moving, never flinching. The worst part is, to me, his appearance was clear as day. But I was the only one who could see him. So, we continued like this for the next 3 years, where I occupied the slide during the day, and he occupied it at night. And each time when I looked at him from the upper window, I wondered, why didn't he ever move? And why didn't it try to enter my home? But after those 3 years, my father got rid of that green slide due to wear and tear. And the instant he did is when I stopped seeing the Shadow Man. It wasn't until many years later I found out that what I saw as a kid was an ancient shadow creature that has been given the name Hat Man, a kind of paralysis demon that has been spotted all over the world for many decades by others like me. And from the sound of it, I was the lucky one. Because other people's encounters with the Hat Man was in their own homes at night, staring them down as they slept, keeping them paralyzed out of fear. And what seems like it's draining your actual life energy from you. I was spared that fate because I found out later that my parents, in their youth, had tried many different kinds of religious and spiritual practices until they settled on Christianity, not long after I was born. And so they did their best to protect me from whatever paranormal powers that be could have lingered from their past. Because of the protections and blessings they did, the Hat Man was physically unable to enter my house and couldn't do anything about it. All it could do was just stand outside and think. I guess the moral of this story is, be thankful to those above you that protect you from what you can't see. Otherwise, you might just experience something truly terrifying. Whoa! That was amazing writing. I love that. There was a moral, a theme, and everything. And it's so relatable because, like, how would you know your parents, like, didn't dabble in different religions growing up? You wouldn't know that. It'd be just like a dark chapter of their past kind of thing. Especially, like, could you imagine if your parents were, like, really Christian? Like, by the book? And they were just like, yeah, you know, at some point we, like, casted spells and stuff. And, there might be something following us from all the way back then. That is so cool. Nora, thank you for sharing your story. I hope I did it justice with my reading. I loved it. That's so good. This is Doctuh's ghost story. It was during my younger years. I was maybe 5, 8 years old at the time. One summer night, while in the country home in upstate New York, I was sitting on the really soft chair. Super comfortable, seriously. and I was minding my own business. And then, all of a sudden, I heard some strange noises coming from the nearby hallway. At first, I thought nothing of it, until the noises happened again. Then, I started to get pretty scared. Unfortunately, my fears would be realized when a light blue ghost woman wearing a Victorian-styled clothing popped into view, eerily floating like a bat out of hell in the night. Instantly, noticing my presence, she proceeded to jump and attack me. Everything after that is a blur. Is she still within me? Was she purged from my being? I'm not sure I'll ever truly know. Okay, that's terrifying because you have zero resolution because you don't know. Could you imagine? You could be possessed right now and you wouldn't even know it. This ghost story is from what? It was a quiet and scary evening. Just like this one. I was playing video games and was so enthralled in it that I forgot to eat all day. So, I decided to order myself some Taco Bell. I wish I would have known I wish I would have known then what I know now. Because later that same evening, Taco Bell did what Taco Bell does. So I went to the bathroom, but just as the clock struck, as I finished, I realized I forgot to buy toilet paper! Thunder noises! To that day, no one knows what happened in that bathroom after that. Only that you could hear the faint sobbing of a middle-aged man fading slowly into the deep of the night. You see, chat, sometimes the realest ghost stories are just our lives. The things that happen to us before we die. Have you ever considered this? The disappearance of the spooky toilet paper!
What is that scent title? The disappearance of the spooky toilet paper.
Heck yeah, heck yeah. Honestly, that might be the most relatable ghost story I've ever heard. Everyone I know that likes Taco Bell admits the price they must pay for Taco Bell. This is KrisNekomata's ghost story. Except, it's actually a story from KrisNekomama, Chris's mother, when she was just a wee kitten. Out in the wastes of the New Mexican deserts. She lived in a small house near the edge of the town, with the soft yellow lights of the few street lights of the Pueblo Pequeño, where she grew up. She was playing with her sister and cousin, pillow fighting and causing a ruckus, as you did as a kid. She had been warned about mirrors and windows at night. She learned not to look into them. She knew that they reflect not only your soul back to you, but were portals for evil spirits and lost souls. This night, the sky was clear, the moon was bright, and by moonlight the children played, giggling and having fun. The thought that they were being watched didn't cross their minds until the moonlight was blocked by someone looking into the window at them. My mama looked up, mad that someone would be blocking the light. A mistake. As her eyes met two empty holes and a wide, unyielding smile. A smile that derived its form and existence from the chill and fear running through the mind of my mother. It begged her for a response, to give herself to it and play. Her response was a scream. A scream that would send her uncle out of the house with a weapon, ready to chase off a creeper. However, when he got outside, there was no one. No one for miles around. Keep in mind, there is nowhere to hide for miles around this house, located on the edge of town with nothing but sand. But a haunting laugh could be heard, carried by the wind. A laugh that would haunt my mother forever.